Hello everyone, this class will be an introduction to the nervous system. The learning objectives would be name the different parts of central nervous system and give the functions, understand the functions of nervous system, name the glial cells and give their functions, give the structure and functions of neurons and classify different types of neurons. Nervous system is well-organized system of communication that allows individual to interact with his external environment. It is also a system of integration that coordinates functions of various internal organ systems of the body. Neural connections between body parts provide basis for anatomical and physiological communications that help in smooth execution of most of the systemic functions such as gastrointestinal functions, secretion of hormones, functions of heart, lungs, kidney, and musculoskeletal system, and so on. The nervous system consists of three divisions: the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and autonomic nervous system. Central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord. The brain is situated in the skull, which continues into the vertebral canal as the spinal cord. The brain is divided into three parts. The prosencephalon. This is the forebrain, which consists of the telencephalon, the two cerebral hemispheres, and diencephalon, that includes thalamus, hypothalamus, metathalamus, and subthalamus. Telencephalon means it is meant for the perception of sensation, cognition, learning and memory, and planning and programming of responses. The diencephalon is primarily meant for relay of information to the cortex and control of autonomic and endocrine functions. Mesencephalon consists of midbrain structures, which includes corpora quadrigeminea, cerebral peduncles, substantia nigra, tegmentum, and mini midbrain nuclei. Midbrain contains central pattern generator for locomotion and nuclei for writing reflexes. It also contains part of reticular formation. Rhombencephalon is the hindbrain, which consists of metencephalon, the pons and cerebellum, and myencephalon, that is medulla oblongata. The midbrain, pons, and medulla are combinedly known as brainstem. The main functions of brainstem are control of cardiovascular and respiratory functions, motor activities, sleep wakefulness, and visceral functions. So this is the diagram showing the central nervous system, which is made of the prosencephalon, that is the forebrain, which includes cerebral hemispheres, and diencephalon. And diencephalon includes structures like thalamus, hypothalamus. Mesencephalon is the midbrain, and the rhombencephalon is the hindbrain, which consists of the pons, cerebellum, and the myencephalon, that is the medulla. Spinal cord starts from base of the skull as extension of medulla and continues till the body of first lumbar vertebra. Thus, spinal cord does not run the full length of the vertebral column in adults. The space at the end of spinal cord, especially between L1 and L2 vertebral segments, is used in tapping cerebrospinal fluid during lumbar puncture. Spinal cord has 31 segments, each having a motor and sensory nerve root. The nerve roots combine to form the 31 bilaterally symmetrical pairs of spinal nerves. Spinal cord contains all ascending and descending tracts. The main function of spinal cord is to receive sensory inputs from peripheral structures via somatic nerves and transmit them to the brain, and convey the signals originating from brain, motor, and autonomic areas to the target structures. Coming to peripheral nervous system, it includes somatic nerves that comes out of the spinal cord to innervate different body structures like skin, muscles, bones. The main function of peripheral nervous system is to collect and convey information from peripheral structures to CNS via sensory axons and convey motor signals from central nervous system to the muscles and related structures via motor neurons. Autonomic nervous system consists of nerve fibers originating from spinal cord and brain stem that innervate visceral structures. These fibers accompany somatic and cranial nerves to the visceral organs. The ANS has sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions that work reciprocally to regulate visceral functions. The major functions of the nervous system are they are important for communication between body parts and integration of systemic functions. They're involved in appropriate regulation of the body functions. They coordinate the coordinated interaction of the body with the environment. The neural regulation is the major controlling mechanism of many functions and processes of the body. The nervous system achieves its objective through neurons that are designed for rapid transmission of information from one body part to the other. The CNS accomplishes its functions through four major processes, that is recognition of stimulus and transmission of information in the form of nerve impulse to the central nervous system, then the processing of information in CNS and perception of the sensation, then generation of appropriate command signals in the central nervous system, then specific responses in accordance to the command signal conveyed by the central nervous system. Stimulus recognition and transmission of information to central nervous system. This process by which we become aware of our environment through various sensation. Sensation is nothing but it is the basic recognition of the stimulus. It is a perceptible change in some form of physical energy in the environment. Sensory detection starts with application of a stimulus. Then it requires receptors. Receptors transduce environmental energy into action potential in sensory neurons. This becomes possible due to the presence of different modalities of receptors in the body that detect changes in their environment. The forms of stimuli that are detected by receptors include mechanical, chemical, photic that is light, auditory that is sound, thermal that is temperature, and electrical. The sensory neurons transmit information in the form of nerve action potential from receptors to the central nervous system via sensory pathways. So details of these mechanisms will be discussed in a sensory system. Then the information processing and generation of command signals in the central nervous system. The information received by central nervous system is processed by different mechanisms in different steps. The general outline of these events are as follows. The action potential, that is sensory signal, is transmitted, is first relayed in the thalamus and then processed in sensory cortex. The processed signal is then transferred into the other signals in the sensory networks in the brain. Then integration of the processed signals into the appropriate command signals through the detailed planning and programming mechanisms. Then transmission of the command signal to the effector organ for the implementation of the plan. Then learning based on the sensory inputs and then storage learned information in memory for future utilization of the knowledge. The response consists of movement of the body parts, that is motor activities, and change in the visceral functions, that is through the autonomic responses, or even change in behavior of the individual. Thus the response may be an internal change such as alteration in cognition, behavior, etc., or an external change such as motor activities, and details of these mechanisms are discussed in the motor system. The cellular components of central nervous system. Despite of its complexity, the CNS consists of only two principal cell types, that is glial cells and neurons. Glial cells of nervous system, they are called as neuroglia, and neuroglia support and protect the neurons and maintain homeostasis of fluids that bathe the neurons. The neurons transmit impulses in the form of action potential. The neuroglia are 10 to 30 times plentiful than the neurons. Glial cells neither conduct action potential nor form functional synapse with other cells. However, they can be passively polarized in response to nearby neural activity. Though glial cells generally provide support for the neurons, their functions are complex and not completely understood. The functions of glial cells, they form the mechanical matrix in which neurons are embedded. They play metabolic and nutritive roles for neurons. They may help to regulate the body flow through the brain. They may act as a sink or source for ions. They insulate axons and synapses and electrically isolate them from each another. They phagocytosize neural debris. There are different types. There are at least 4 types of glial cells have been described in the CNS. The astrocytes are also called as astroglia, oligodendrocytes, oligodendroglia, ependymal cells, and microglia. Schwann cells are glial cells in the peripheral nervous system. Astrocytes are so named because they are star shaped. They are found abundantly throughout the brain and spinal cord. The processes of astrocytes surround the neurons and their axons and often terminate on the wall of blood vessels. The functions of astrocytes are they provide mechanical matrix, they serve metabolic and nutritive functions for neurons. The synapses in the CNS are usually surrounded by the process of astrocytes, so thus astrocytes electrically insulate synapses and separate them from one another. Oligodendrocytes are found in close to the myelinated axons in the brain and spinal cord. The process of oligodendrocytes wrap many times around the axons to form myelin sheath. This sheath not only insulates axon from one another but also limits the current flow across the axon membrane, that is axolemma. Because of this myelination, action potential is conducted in a saltatory fashion in myelinated fibers, which is much faster than the transmission of impulse in unmyelinated fibers. The oligodendrocytes provide myelin sheath for neurons in CNS in a much similar way the Schwann cells do for the peripheral nerves. Microglia are the smallest cells in the central nervous system. They are the scavenger cells in the brain. If the nervous system is damaged, nervous tissue is damaged or infected, these cells enlarge and become mononuclear phagocytes to eliminate debris and organisms. The ependymal cells line the surfaces of the brain's ventricles and the central canal of the spinal cord, and their function is unclear, so which is another type of neuroglial cells in the central nervous system. Okay. So these are the different structures. So these are the astrocytes, which are star shaped, and these are the oligodendrocytes, the function of which is mainly the myelination of the nerve fiber, and one neuroglia, one oligodendrocyte can myelinate as many as 40 neurons. And these are the microglia, so which are having a phagocytic activity in the central nervous system, and these are the ependymal cells. Coming to the neuron, neuron is a nerve cell and it's a functional unit of the nervous system. The neuron consists of cell body, which is called as soma or perikaryon, dendrites and axons. So this is the structure of the neuron, which consists of the body or soma or perikaryon. This is the axons, and these are the telodendria with the terminal buttons, so which forms the presynaptic terminals. And the body is made up of mainly the dendrites, which is a receptive area, which is made up of the Niesel's bodies, nucleus, and the axon hillock, where the action potential is generated. The soma of the body consists of nucleus and cytoplasm. Cytoplasm contains many organelles like endoplasmic reticulum, a prominent Golgi apparatus, many mitochondria, and cytoskeletal elements that include microfilaments and microtubules. The special granules present in the cytoplasm are called as Nissls bodies that are modified rough endoplasmic reticulum and acts as a biosynthetic apparatus for synthesis of proteins in the neurons. The Nissls bodies are present throughout the soma except in the axon hillock. The nucleus is centrally or eccentrically placed and contains nucleolus. The dendrites are the tapering processes of variable complexity that arise from the soma. They account for more than 90% of the total surface area of neuron. The parts of the dendrites that are close to the cell body contains Nissl granules and Golgi apparatus, whereas the parts that are present away from the soma contains no Nissls granules. The dendrites contain mainly the microfilaments and microtubules. The dendrites and cell bodies are main parts of the neuron for receiving information and therefore from receiving or receptor zone of the neuron. They form the receiving or receptor zone of the neuron. The dendrites conduct impulses towards the cell body. Axon is the longest process of the neuron. It arises from the soma at a specialized region called as axon hillock. The axon hillock is tapered part of the cell body that gives rise to axon. The difference between the axon hillock, that is the proximal part of the axon, and the proximal dendrites, that is the proximal parts of the dendrites, are that the axon hillock does not contain Nissls granules, endoplasmic reticulum, or Golgi apparatus, whereas the proximal dendrites contains all these organelles. The axon hillock continues as unmyelinated proximal part of the axon called as initial segment. The initial segment is the spike initiation zone of the neurons, as action potential normally arises here due to the summation of electrical activities that have occurred in the cell body and dendrites. The interior of the axon is called as axon cylinder that contains axoplasm. The axoplasm contains mitochondria, neurofibrils, and vesicles. Nissls bodies are not found in the axon. The neurotransmitter substances are synthesized in the soma and transported in the axoplasm by means of axonal flow to the synapse. If axons are covered by myelin sheath, the nerve fibers are known as myelinated fibers, and without the cover they are unmyelinated fibers. There are different types of neurons and classified according to the number of processes, length of axon, functions of neurons, and patterns of dendrites. According to the arrangement of axon processes, the neurons are classified into unipolar, pseudounipolar, bipolar, and multipolar neurons. The unipolar neurons, they have a single processes, as they are usually found in the invertebrate. In vertebrates, they are found in the autonomic nervous system. Pseudounipolar neurons, the axon after originating from the soma splits into central and peripheral processes. The example is the dorsal root ganglion cell, that is the primary sensory neurons with cell bodies in the dorsal root ganglion. Bipolar neurons have two processes which are arising from the cell body, and the example is bipolar cell in the retina. The multipolar neurons, many processes arise from the soma, and the example is spinal motor neuron. According to the length of axon, the neurons are classified into two categories, Golgi type 1 and Golgi type 2. Golgi type 1, these are with the short axons. Dendrites of these neurons terminate near soma. The example is cortical inhibitory neurons. And Golgi type 2 neurons are long. The cortical motor neurons, the neurons that give rise to the corticospinal tracts, are the best examples. According to the functions, neurons can be divided into sensory or motor neurons. Sensory neurons are the neurons that carry impulses from receptor to the central nervous system and are called as afferent neurons. The motor neurons are the neurons that carry impulses from central nervous system to the target organs, and these are called as efferent neurons. According to the dendritic pattern, two types of neurons are present: pyramidal cells and stellate cells. Pyramidal cells, the dendrites of these cells spread like pyramids. The example is hippocampal pyramidal neurons. Stellate cells, their radial shaped spread of dendrites occur in these cells. The examples are cortical stellate cells. So this is how these are the different types of the neurons, that is unipolar neuron, the pseudo unipolar neuron, whereas example is dorsal root ganglion, and bipolar neurons, they are present in the retina, and the multipolar neurons, one of the best example is the motor neuron. So this is in brief about the introduction or organization of the central nervous system. Thank you.